Karen reported my work truck as an eyesore and tried to have it towed without warning. Big mistake. She didn't know the towing company she called was mine. What followed turned the whole neighborhood upside down. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on Karen and exposed her HOA power trip, make sure to subscribe to Hey Stories for more jaw-dropping neighborhood drama. Comment below, where are you watching from? I never thought owning a towing company would put me at the center of a neighborhood war. But that is exactly what happened when Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, decided that my work truck didn't belong in our aesthetic community. I moved into Maple Glen 2 years ago, after saving up for nearly a decade to finally give my wife and son the peaceful suburban life they deserved, away from the noise and grind of the city. My wife Rachel is a school counselor, quiet and kind, always baking cookies for the neighbors and leaving little handwritten notes in mailboxes during the holiday. My son Malcolm is 8, obsessed with monster trucks and space, and he's on the autism spectrum, which means stability and predictability are incredibly important for him. Our new home gave us that. A modest 2-story with a wide driveway, a tiny garden in front, and a good view of the sunrise from the porch. Life was peaceful at first, even when I parked my company's tow truck, a black and chrome beast I called Hercules, in the driveway. I run a small but growing family towing business, passed down from my late father, and I keep Hercules spotless, well-made, and professionally wrapped in clean, discreet branding. For 6 months, not a single neighbor said a word about it, until Karen moved into the blue house across the street. She didn't introduce herself, but we knew her name within the week. It was on every complaint, every new rule proposal, every letter taped to the community bulletin board. She had the HOA in her grip by the second month and wasted no time throwing that weight around. It started small, notes about trash bins being left out too long, or lawn grass being half an inch too high. Then came the meeting mandates, new restrictions on house paint colors, fence heights, and yes, visible commercial vehicles. When I received the first formal notice citing my truck as visually disruptive, I tried to be diplomatic. I showed up at the HOA meeting, explained that it was my only vehicle, how I never parked on the street, and that it was always clean and legally permitted. Karen smiled with that condescending grin, the kind that is more of a threat than a courtesy, and said, "We just want to maintain neighborhood charm." I offered compromises. I'd park it behind a privacy screen, or build a port-style enclosure. She shot them all down, smug and firm, claiming it set the wrong tone for prospective buyers. I knew then this wasn't about community rules, it was personal. Maybe she didn't like seeing a black family thriving on her street. Maybe it bothered her that someone with grease under his nails could own a business and a house here, or maybe she just didn't like being told no. Whatever it was, she wasn't done. A week later, I came home from a long haul to find my truck missing. My heart stopped. At first, I thought it had been stolen, but there was no broken glass, no signs of forced entry, just clean pavement. My neighbors saw my face and came over immediately. One of them, Greg, saying, "Man, Karen had a tow truck here earlier, said it was blocking her view." My ears rang. A call dispatch. None of my trucks were dispatched to my address. That's when it hit me. She called another company. She didn't just complain, she acted. She used HOA funds and power to tow my personal property without a violation notice, without due process, and, most importantly, without realizing she was walking into a trap. See, the towing industry is a tight-knit world. I know every operator in the county, every company, big and small. I made a few calls and confirmed that a startup out of Oak Hill had taken the job. I spoke to the manager, explained the situation, and he nearly choked. "Man, we didn't know it was your truck. We just got an urgent call from someone saying the vehicle was unauthorized. They agreed to return the truck free of charge, apologized profusely, and even offered me 2 weeks of subcontracted work to make up for it." When Hercules rolled back into my driveway, gleaming under the porch light, I stood in the street with my arms crossed, just in time for Karen to come out in her robe, clutching her phone. She didn't expect to see the truck back. She definitely didn't expect me to grin and wave like nothing had happened. But that night, something changed in me. I realized that if she wanted a war, she was going to get one, and she had no idea I was better equipped than anyone she'd ever tried to intimidate. I wasn't just some guy with a truck. I was the guy who owned the trucks, the guy who trained half the drivers in this region, the guy who understood every zoning loophole, legal clause, and enforcement tactic in the book. Karen didn't know it yet, but she'd just picked a fight with someone who had the power to turn her HOA kingdom upside down, with nothing but a towhook and a plan. I didn't come out swinging right away, not because I was afraid, but because revenge, the kind that hits deep, needs to simmer before it strikes. Over the next week, Karen strutted around the neighborhood like a peacock in pearls, telling anyone who would listen that she had cleaned up the view by getting rid of the working-class eyesore across the street. Her words, not mine. I had neighbors knocking on my door, whispering apologies and encouragement, some bringing over cookies or cold beers as subtle tokens of solidarity. Rachel told me to let it go, but even she could see the way Karen looked at our home, like it didn't belong, like we didn't belong. So I waited. I researched. I reviewed the HOA's bylaws line by line, and to no one's surprise, I discovered that Karen had completely violated procedure. She had no legal grounds to authorize the removal of a vehicle from private property without proper notice, a hearing, or a vote from the board, and she never got any of those. More importantly, the HOA insurance didn't cover unauthorized actions by the president. That meant, if I filed a property damage claim or legal suit, the cost wouldn't fall on the HOA, it would fall on Karen. But I wasn't just going to sue her. Not yet. No, I wanted her to crumble before the paperwork hit. So I began quietly exposing her hypocrisy. I launched a new company campaign, one that offered discounted tow services for disabled residents, single parents, and veterans in Maple Glen. We began parking pristine, branded trucks at strategic spots, fully legal, fully permitted, near the HOA clubhouse, community park, and, yes, even on the legal public curb in front of Karen's house. Every time she stepped out, there was a shiny reminder of the man she tried to humiliate. I also hired my cousin Malik, a graphic designer with a taste for satire, to create a mock HOA newsletter titled Karen's Corner. It was anonymous, of course, and featured hilarious but factual stories about her power trips, double standards, and ridiculous quotes complete with illustrations. It spread like wildfire. Residents began laughing, sharing it, and some even slipping it into their mailboxes like secret rebellion mail. Then came the big move. I bought a decommissioned tow truck, gutted the engine, and repurposed it into a community library on wheels. I painted it with murals of the neighborhood's history, filled it with donated books, and parked it legally in my driveway with a sign, "Free books for all. Even you, Karen." The neighborhood loved it. Kids came by to read. Local papers picked up the story. The same vehicle Karen called offensive was now a celebrated piece of community joy. She was furious, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she snapped. And she did, publicly. At the next HOA meeting, she accused me of harassment, of sabotaging the HOA's integrity, and in an ironic twist of fate, bringing an unlicensed vehicle into a residential zone. I calmly stood, presented my permits, zoning compliance, and photos of her unauthorized towing incident. The room went silent. I could see cracks in her power starting to show. Even her usual allies on the board avoided her gaze. But the final straw came a week later, when Karen filed a formal complaint to the county claiming my truck was a hazard to children and promoted unsafe industrial activity in a residential area. That complaint triggered an inspection, but the inspector, my old friend Janelle, a be-the-book professional, who also happened to owe me a favor from when I helped her son with the breakdown last winter. She came, inspected everything, smiled, and filed a glowing report that cleared me of all claims and included a written commendation for positive community enrichment. I didn't even have to lift a finger. The system Karen tried to abuse now protected me, and she was livid. She started walking around with a camera, filming everything I did, barking at kids playing near my library truck, yelling at dogs, sending petty violations to the HOA board like clockwork. But her paranoia only fueled the fire. More neighbors came to my side. A retired lawyer named Gloria offered to review Karen's term as president and discovered she had falsified vote counts in last year's election. A petition circulated quietly. One afternoon, I returned home to find a group of residents standing in Karen's yard, waving papers, demanding a vote to remove her as president. She screamed, threatened legal action, but she didn't realize something vital. The board had turned against her, and I had friends in places she couldn't see. But I still wasn't done. I wanted her to experience the same humiliation she tried to lay on me. In public, the morning of Karen's reckoning was sunny, quiet, almost unnaturally peaceful. The kind of morning that makes you think something big is about to happen. I had received a tip the night before from Gloria, the retired attorney who was now the unofficial leader of the HOAS reform group, that Karen was planning one final stunt before the special vote to remove her as president. She had requested a private towing contract to clear unauthorized vehicles from public view before the next HOA meeting, which meant she was planning to once again target my library truck and possibly other vehicles she deemed unsightly. What she didn't know, and this was the delicious part, was that I had acquired the very towing company she called. A few months earlier, I had quietly bought out the Oak Hill startup that had towed my truck that first time. They were struggling, and I had the resources. I kept the company name the same and hired a few trusted employees to run it under my direction. It was a shadow move, one that made sure I'd know exactly when and where Karen was planning her next strike. So when she scheduled her early morning cleanup, I was ready. I parked my library truck with full permits in my driveway, placed lawn chairs beside it, and invited a group of neighbors to a neighborhood We had kids, parents, teachers, even a local news crew that had caught wind of the story thanks to a tip I sent anonymously. When the tow truck arrived, my tow truck, I stepped forward in a branded polo with my company's new logo on the chest and greeted the driver, an employee of mine named Vince, who gave me a wink and played his part. Karen, in her signature wide-brim hat and clip-on sunglasses, came marching across the street, HOA clipboard in hand, barking orders to the driver. "Remove this vehicle immediately. It's unlicensed and an eyesore." Vince looked at me, then back at her, and calmly said, "Ma'am, I can't tow this vehicle. It's owned by my boss." "You're talking to him." Her face turned white, then red, then a color I'm not sure even has a name. "What do you mean he's your boss?" she snapped, pointing at me like I had just committed a crime. The news camera pivoted, catching every second of the scene. I took a step forward, smiled, and said, "That's right, Karen. The towing company you called now belongs to me. And since you've requested the removal of a legally parked and fully permitted community literacy vehicle in front of children and news cameras, we're going to have to document this incident thoroughly." She tried to backpedal, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that she didn't realize it was mine, that she was just doing her duty. Reporters swarmed her with questions. Parents confronted her. A little girl even asked her why she hated books. The footage went viral within hours. The HOA meeting that evening was standing room. Gloria stood at the front, held up the bylaw violations, the petition, and the news footage, and motioned for a vote. It wasn't even close. Karen was removed as HOA president in a landslide, banned from initiating any further enforcement actions, and ordered to personally reimburse the HOA for all unauthorized towing and legal expenses. But I didn't stop there. I filed a civil suit quietly, strategically, for the illegal tow of my original truck months earlier. I had all the documentation, the dispatch logs, the recorded calls. Karen tried to settle, begged her lawyer to make it go away, but my terms were firm. She'd publicly apologize, cover all damages, and agree to a cease and desist on any further HOA-related activity for 5 years. Her lawyer said, "You know you're ruining her reputation." I replied, "She did that herself. I'm just making sure it's permanent." The court agreed. Karen issued a formal apology, filmed and shared by the same local news crew who covered the library truck debacle, and retreated into her house like a dethroned monarch. Her HOA badge was gone. Her clipboard disappeared. The community, once afraid of her glare, now thrived in her absence. My wife Rachel, she baked a retirement cake for Karen and left it anonymously on her porch. It read, "Thanks for towing yourself out of power." We all had a good laugh. Malcolm, my son, didn't fully understand what happened, but he loved that we kept the library truck and turned it into a weekend learning center. We added a mini science lab in the back, and soon schools were visiting. What began as a petty power play from a bitter neighbor ended up transforming our block into a stronger, more connected place. And as for me, I kept growing the business, but I always made time to join the weekend reading group, SIP Lemonade, with my neighbors, and smile every time I looked across the street at the woman who thought she could erase me with a tow, not knowing I was the one holding the keys the entire time.